Hey, sweet peas, if you listen real close, you'll hear some fireworks going off. Maybe. I know I can hear them. I'm sorry I didn't read yesterday. I don't know how it's going to go today. We'll see. Wait so late. Chapter 29 of The Old Curiosity Shop by Doll's Chickens. Or Charles Dickens. Unquestionably, Mrs. Jarley had an inventive genius. In the midst of the various devices for attracting visitors to the exhibition, little Nell was not forgotten. The light cart in which the brigand usually made his perambulations, being gaily dressed with flags and streamers, and the brigand placed therein, contemplating the miniature of his beloved as usual, Nell was accommodated with a seat beside him, decorated with artificial flowers, and in this state and ceremony rode slowly through the town every morning, dispersing handbills from a basket to the sound of drum and trumpet. The beauty of the child, coupled with her gentle and timid bearing, produced quite a sensation in the little country place. The brigand, heretofore a source of exclusive interest in the streets, became a mere secondary consideration, and to be important only as a part of the show of which she was the chief attraction. Grown-up folks began to be interested in the bright-eyed girl, and some score of little boys fell desperately in love, and constantly left enclosures of nuts and apples directed in small text at the waxwork door. This desirable impression was not lost on Mrs. Jarley, who, lest Nell should become too cheap, soon sent the brigand out alone again, and kept her in the exhibition room, where she described the figures every half hour, to the great satisfaction of admiring audiences. And these audiences were of a very superior description, including a great many young ladies' boarding schools, whose favor Mrs. Jarley had been at great pains to conciliate, by altering the face and costume of Mr. Grimaldi as clown to represent Mr. Lindley Murray, as he appeared when engaged in the composition of his English grammar, and turned a murderess of great renown into Mrs. Hannah More, both of which likenesses were admitted by Miss Monflathers, who was at the head of the head boarding and day establishment in the town, and who condescended to take a private view with 8 chosen young ladies. To be quite startling from their extreme correctness, Mr. Pitt, in a nightgown and bedgown, and without his boots, represented the poet Cowper with perfect exactness, and Mary Queen of Scots in a dark wig, white shirt collar, and male attire was such a complete image of Lord Byron that the young ladies quite screamed when they saw it. Miss Monflathers, however, rebuked this enthusiasm, and took occasion to reprove Mrs. Jarley for not keeping her collection more select, observing that his lordship had held several opinions quite incompatible with waxwork honors, and adding something about a dean and chapter which Mrs. Jarley did not understand. Although her duties were sufficiently laborious, Nell found in the lady of the caravan a very kind and considerate person, who had only a peculiar relish for being comfortable herself, a peculiar relish for being comfortable herself, but for making everybody about her comfortable also, which latter taste, it may be remarked, is even in persons who live in much finer places than caravans, a far more rare and uncommon one from the first, and is not by any means its necessary consequence. As her popularity procured her various little fees from the visitors, on which her patroness never demanded any toll, and as her grandfather too was well treated and useful, she had no cause of anxiety in connection with the art waxwork, beyond that which sprung from her recollection of Quilp and her fears that he might return and one day suddenly encounter them. Quilp indeed was a perpetual nightmare to the child, who was constantly haunted by a vision of his ugly face and stunted figure. She slept for their better security in the room where the waxworks figures were, and she never retired to this place at night, but she tortured herself, she could not help it, with imagining a resemblance in some one or other of their death-like faces to the dwarf. And this fancy would sometimes so gain upon her that she would almost believe he had removed the figure and stood within the clothes. Then there were so many of them with their great glassy eyes, and as they stood one behind the other all about her bed, that would be creepy. They looked so like living creatures and yet so unlike, in their grim stillness and silence, that she had a kind of terror of them for their own sakes, and would often lie watching their dusky figures until she was obliged to rise and light a candle, or go and sit at the open window and feel a companionship in the bright stars. At these times she would recall the old house and the window at which she used to sit alone, and then she would think of poor Kit and all his kindness until the tears came into her eyes, and she would weep and smile together. Often and anxiously at this silent hour her thoughts reverted to her grandfather, and she would wonder how much he remembered of their former life, and whether he was ever really mindful of the change in their condition and of their late helplessness and destitution. When they were wandering about, she seldom thought of this, but now she could not help considering what would become of them if he fell sick, or her own strength were to fail her. He was very patient and willing, happy to execute any little task, and glad to be of use, but he was in the same listless state, with no prospect of improvement. A mere child, a poor, thoughtless, vacant creature, a harmless, fond old man, susceptible of tender love and regard for her, and of pleasant and painful impressions, but alive to nothing more. It made her very sad to know that this was so sad to see it, that sometimes when he sat idly by, smiling and nodding to her when she looked round, or when he caressed some little child and carried it to and fro, as he was fond of playing by the hour together, perplexed by its simple questions, yet patient under his own infirmity, and seeing almost conscious of it too, and humbled even before the mind of an infant. So sad it made her to see him thus, that she would burst into tears, and withdrawing into some secret place, fall down upon her knees, and prayed that he might be restored. But in the bitterness of her grief was not in beholding him in this condition, when he was at least content and tranquil, nor in her solitary meditations on his altered state, though these were trials for a young heart. Cause for deeper and heavier sorrow was yet to come. One evening, a holiday night with them, Nell and her grandfather were out to walk. They had been rather closely confirmed for some days, and the weather being warm, they strolled a long distance. Clear of the town, they took a footpath which struck through some pleasant fields, judging that it would terminate in the road they quitted and enabled them to return that way. It made, however, a much wider circuit than they had supposed, and thus were tempted onward until sunset, when they reached the track of which they were in search, and stopped to rest. It had been gradually getting overcast, and now the sky was dark and lowering, save where the glory of the departing sun piled up masses of gold and burning fire, decaying embers of which gleamed here and there through the black veil, and shone redly down upon the earth. The wind began to moan in hollow murmurs as the sun went down, carrying a glad day elsewhere, and a train of dull clouds coming up against it menaced thunder and lightning. Large drops of rain soon began to fall, and as the storm clouds came sailing onward, others supplied the void that they left behind and spread over all the sky. Then was heard the low rumbling of distant thunder. Then the lightning quivered, and then the darkness of an hour seemed to have gathered in an instant. Today, we only got a few bolts of lightning, but a clap of thunder was so close behind that lightning, so I know it was, close. They say count between the time you see the lightning and you hear the thunder, and that's how many miles it is or something like that, how close it is to you. It shook the trailer. It was scary, and it kind of made my hair stand up. And I was out on the halfway, open up the back door, and the deck was right there, so I closed that door. I love a good storm, but I have to be safe inside. I do have a healthy respect for the lightning. Gathered in an instant, fearful of taking shelter beneath a tree or hedge, the old man and the child hurried along the high road, hoping to find some house in which they could seek a refuge from the storm, which had now burst forth in earnest, and every moment increased in violence. Drenched with the pelting rain, confused by the deafening thunder, and bewildered by the glare of the forked lightning, they would have passed a solitary house without being aware of its vicinity, had not a man who was standing at the door called lustily to them to enter. Your ears ought to be better than other folks, at any rate, if you make so little of the chance of being struck blind, he said, retreating from the window and shading his eyes with his hands as the jagged lightning came again. What were you going past for, eh? He added as he closed the door and led the way along a passage to a room behind. Well, we didn't see the house, sir, till we heard you calling, Neil replied. No wonder, said the man, with this lightning in one's eyes. By the by, Or that goes with what I just read. You had better stand by the fire here and dry yourselves a bit. You can call for what you like if you want anything. If you don't want anything, you're not obliged to give an order. Don't be afraid of that. This is a public house, that's all. The Valiant Soldier is pretty well known hereabouts. Is this house called the Valiant Soldier, sir? Asked Nell. I thought everybody knew that, replied the landlord. Where have you come from? If you don't know the Valiant Soldier as well as the church catechism, this is the Valiant Soldier by James Grove. Jim Groves, honest Jim Groves, as is a man of unblemished moral character and has a good dry skittle ground. If any man has got anything to say against Jim Groves, let him say it to Jim Groves, and Jim Groves can accommodate him with a customer on any terms from £4 a side to 40. With these words, the speaker tapped himself on the waistcoat to intimate that he was the Jim Groves so highly eulogized. Spared scientifically at a counterfeit Jim Groves who was sparring at society in general from a black frame over the chimney piece and applying a half-empty glass of spirits and water to his lips helped Jim Groves' health. The night being warm, there was a large screen drawn across the room for a barrier against the heat of the fire. It seemed as if somebody on the other side of this screen had been insinuating doubts of Mr. Groves' prowess and had thereby given rise to these egotistical expressions. For Mr. Groves wound up his defiance by giving a loud knock upon it with his knuckles and pausing for a reply from the other side. Hang on. About to give out. Seeing how much is left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. A little over 9 pages. So I'm going to stop there. I'm sorry, but my throat's a little sore. And my ear hurts. My ear hurts. Which is the side I sleep on, so I guess it drains that away. I hadn't been taking my Zyrtec because it makes me so sleepy. Guess I just need to take it and go to bed, huh? Yes, I should. I still have not finished this vest. I hadn't touched it. I have not touched it. I did this morning, but not since. Not anymore since then. But I will get it done definitely before. I mean, that's just probably 2 rounds. Enough for 2 rounds. I've been looking around for that other bottle of Noro just in case. And I said, Hannah. I think I said Lindsay one time, Hannah another. I meant Lindsay. Lindsay's my little petite girl. Even though she is the eldest, she is the smallest. Hannah's like her daddy. Tall. Big girl. Love y'all. Be sweet. Don't be ugly. Have a wonderful 4th. My brother said it's not supposed to rain here. I haven't checked the weather. Why don't I do that right quick? While I'm thinking about it. Some other people were saying it's going to rain tomorrow, but can't remember who said it. where they lived. 50% chance of rain in the morning. Somebody said 80%. Oh, it doesn't say morning. Actually, it doesn't. I have to wait till... I'm not sure when. It always rains on the 4th, but usually not till the afternoon. Tuesday, a 30% chance. Wednesday, 60% chance. Thursday, back to 50% chance. Friday, 60. Saturday, 60. Sunday, 50. Oh, mercy me. Oh, well. Have a happy 4th. I will be on tomorrow live at 5, or that's what I have planned. Did I tell y'all my brother got me 3 trays of barbecue, but no sauce. I put a little bit in my, after I ate all the chicken out of my salad, put a little barbecue in there, along with my raspberry vinaigrette, so that was satisfactory. But I will go in the morning if I do make it to the parade. I'm hoping I do. Still haven't found my little video camera. So I don't know if I'll be able to record anything or not, but I will if I can. Love y'all. See you later. Be sweet, don't be ugly. Bye.